I was having a normal Tuesday until I walked to the end of the driveway to check the mail. Among the junk mail and electric bills, I found a thick, official-looking envelope. My name was printed clearly on the front in bold, black letters. I opened it right there on the porch, expecting it to be some boring tax form. Instead, my eyes widened as I read the words. My mom had legally transferred the family property, the beautiful house our father built with his own hands, to my sister Ava. This was the house I was supposed to inherit. This was the one thing our father promised would be mine because he knew I loved the garden more than anything. My hand started to shake so hard that the paper rattled. I felt the world tilt under my feet. I read the legal notice twice, then a third time, hoping my brain was just making a mistake. It wasn't. The signature at the bottom was definitely my mother's. It was dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks of her looking me in the eye and acting like everything was fine while she secretly gave away my future. I felt a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. I went inside and immediately picked up the phone to call my mom. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. When she answered, her voice was light and breezy, like she didn't have a care in the world. "Oh, hello, honey," she said. I could hear music and laughter in the background. I recognized that laugh. It was Ava. "Mum, I just got a legal notice in the mail about the house," I said, my voice cracking. There was a short pause on the other end. Then, she answered casually, almost dismissively. "Oh, that? It's just paperwork, dear. Don't worry your head about it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Just paperwork? You gave the entire property to Ava?" I shouted. I heard Ava giggle again in the background, and it felt like a knife in my chest. How could they act like this was nothing? It was a betrayal of the highest level. My mum sighed as if I was the one being difficult. "We can talk about it later." "We are busy right now," she said before hanging up. I stared at the dead phone, feeling a strange mix of heat and ice in my blood. That night, we were all supposed to meet for a family dinner. I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to face them. As soon as I sat down at the table, the tension was thick enough to cut. I looked at Ava, who was wearing a smug, satisfied grin. She didn't wait long to bring it up. She reached for the salad bowl and said, "Thanks for letting me have the house, Mum. I already have so many ideas for the guest room." I froze mid-bite, my fork hovering in the air. My cousins, who were visiting, all stopped talking and stared at me. The room went silent. My silence spoke volumes. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something, but she just kept cutting her chicken like nothing was wrong. Ava looked at me and shrugged. "Don't look so sad. You wouldn't have been able to afford the taxes anyway," she added with a smirk. I felt a surge of anger so strong I thought I might explode. Instead of screaming, I just set my fork down very quietly. I realized in that moment that they had planned this together. They had turned me into a stranger in my own family. Instead of letting my anger blind me, I decided to be smart. I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. The next morning, I started a secret investigation. I went to the attic and began digging through old boxes of my father's belongings. I looked for financial statements, legal documents, and especially the old wills. I spent hours surrounded by dust and memories. Each page I turned revealed a little more of the truth. I found letters between my mom and her lawyer that showed this wasn't a sudden decision. They had been talking about this for months. I saw notes in the margins where my mom had questioned if I should be told, and a reply from a consultant saying it wasn't necessary. It felt deeply personal. Every document was a piece of a puzzle that showed a total betrayal. They hadn't just made a mistake, they had actively worked to keep me in the dark. I realized that my sister hadn't just asked for the house, she had hunted for it. I sat on the dusty floor with a pile of papers in my lap, feeling like I was finally seeing my family for who they really were. As I dug deeper into the files, I discovered the hidden motive behind the transfer. I found a series of emails that Ava had sent to Mum. In them, Ava had convinced Mum that giving her the house would help the family. She claimed that I was too irresponsible and that I would probably sell the house the moment I got it. She painted a picture of me as someone who didn't care about our father's legacy. The documents showed that Mum never once consulted me or even asked for my side of the story. The betrayal burned hotter than I ever imagined. Ava had used lies to steal my inheritance, and my mother had been all too willing to believe her. It wasn't about the house itself anymore. It was about the fact that they saw me as someone who could be easily erased. They treated me like I was a problem to be solved instead of a daughter and a sister. I realized that Ava wanted the house because she wanted the power that came with it. She wanted to be the one who decided who got to visit and who didn't. I held the emails in my hand, my fingers trembling with a new kind of resolve. A few days later, I decided to approach Mum privately. I wanted to give her one last chance to be honest with me. I found her in the kitchen making tea. "Why didn't you tell me, Mum?" I asked softly. Her eyes dodged mine immediately. She started fussing with the sugar bowl, her movements jerky and nervous. "I made the decision for everyone's good," she said, using that same rehearsed line. Her words stung like salt in a fresh wound. "For everyone's good? Or for Ava's good?" I pressed. She finally looked at me, but there was no apology in her eyes, only irritation. "You've always been so sensitive. Ava needs the stability. You're young. You can find your own way." It was the same old story. She was choosing her favorite child again and acting like it was a noble sacrifice. "You stole what Dad promised me," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was breaking. "He would be ashamed." She turned her back on me and told me to leave if I was going to be difficult. I realized then that talking to her was a waste of time. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. It was time to stop being the victim. Feeling lost and alone, I went to see my closest friend, Leah. We sat on her couch with mugs of coffee, and I told her everything. I showed her the legal notice and the emails I had found. Leah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every word. When I finished, she looked me straight in the eye. "You have to fight this," she said firmly. "They are trying to rewrite your history and take away your future. You can't let them write your story for you." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. She reminded me that I had been belittled and dismissed by them for years, and this was just the final step in their plan. "If you don't stand up now, they will keep doing this forever," she warned. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about what to do next. Leah wasn't just a friend. She was my anchor. She helped me see that I wasn't being sensitive or difficult. I was being wronged. For the first time since I opened that envelope, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was preparing for a battle. I left her house with a plan and the courage to see it through. Leah helped me find a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. His name was Mr. Thorne, and he was very sharp. I brought him all the papers I had found in the attic. He spent an hour reading through the fine print while I sat nervously in his office. Suddenly, he paused and pulled out a magnifying glass. "Wait a minute," he muttered. He pointed to a specific paragraph in the original deed my father had signed years ago. He told me that Mum's new paperwork contained a small, overlooked clause, a detail that Ava and Mum clearly didn't realize existed. It was a right of first refusal, mixed with a specific trust condition. Basically, my father had added a rule that the house could not be transferred to anyone without my written consent as long as I was of legal age. My mother had ignored it because it was buried in old legal jargon that most people skip. "This could change everything," Mr. Thorne said with a thin smile. "They thought they were being clever, but your father was even clever. He protected you even back then." I felt a massive weight lift off my chest. I had a weapon now, and they had no idea. Even though I had a legal path forward, the emotional weight was still heavy. I went back to my room and sat in the dark, trembling. All the years of being overlooked, belittled, and dismissed by my family hit me all at once. I remember the birthdays where Ava got the big gifts, and I got the hand-me-downs. I remember the times they laughed at my dreams and told me to be more like my sister. All those memories felt like heavy stones piled on my chest. Tears started to fall, hot and fast, as I mourned the family I thought I had. I realized I had been trying to earn the love of people who were willing to rob me. It was a painful realization, but it was also a powerful one. I let myself cry until my eyes were red and my throat was sore. But as the sun started to come up the next morning, the sadness began to turn into something else. Determination rose up in me like a cold, bright flame. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. I was fighting for the girl who had been told she didn't matter. I dried my face and stood up. I was ready. While looking through more of my father's old desk drawers, I found something even more shocking. Tucked inside an old book about gardening was a small, sealed envelope addressed only to me. I opened it and found a key and a bank statement. I discovered that Dad had left me a hidden trust fund that my mother had never disclosed to me. The balance was significant, enough to cover any legal fees and much more. It was a fund specifically set aside for my daughter's independence. My father knew my mother would try to control the finances, so he had worked with a different bank to hide this away. Suddenly, the entire power dynamic shifted in my mind. I wasn't the broke, struggling daughter they thought I was. I had resources they didn't even know existed. This changed the game completely. The inheritance might not be lost after all, because now I had the means to fight a long legal battle if I had to. I held the bank statement to my heart, feeling my father's love reaching out from the past. He had seen the future, and he had made sure I wouldn't be left behind. My mother thought she held all the cards, but she was about to find out I had the ace. I went back to Leah's house to have a strategy session. We laid everything out on her kitchen table, the deed with the secret clause, the hidden trust fund, and the emails from Ava. "We have to be careful," Leah said. "No rash moves. We need every step to be calculated." I agreed. I didn't want to just win a legal battle in a quiet office. I wanted the reveal to have a real impact on the family. I wanted them to understand exactly what they had tried to do. We decided that I would keep acting like I was sad and defeated for a little while longer. I needed them to stay overconfident so they wouldn't try to fix their mistakes before I was ready. Every move had to be perfect. We spent hours mapping out a timeline. I would gather more evidence, consult with Mr. Thorne again, and then pick the perfect moment to drop the news. It felt like I was planning a grand performance. I was tired of being the background character in their play. It was time for me to take the lead. Leah looked at the plan and nodded. "This is going to be legendary," she said. I finally felt like I was in control. The next day, I went to visit the house. Ava was already there, moving boxes in. I decided to use the first twist of our plan. I quietly approached Ava, pretending to be ignorant of my new legal power. I acted like I was just there to say goodbye to the place. She immediately started boasting about the house again, showing me the new paint color she had picked. "It's just better this way, you know," she said with a fake sigh. "I'll take much better care of it." I just nodded, secretly noting the inconsistencies in her story. She told me Mom had begged her to take the property, which contradicted the emails I had found where Ava was the one doing the begging. I saw the tiny cracks in her confidence, even if she didn't see them yet. She was so sure of herself that she was getting sloppy with her lies. I felt a strange sense of calm as I watched her walk around the rooms I grew up in. She thought she was building a future here, but she was actually standing on a foundation that was about to shatter. I left without saying much, letting her think she had won. The trap was set. A few weeks later, there was another family gathering. It was my aunt's birthday, and everyone was there. I decided to drop a little teaser to keep them off balance. During a quiet moment in the conversation, I casually mentioned a surprise project I had been working on. I didn't give away any details, but I made sure to mention that it was connected to a special gift from Dad. I saw my mother's hand freeze on her wine glass. Ava's eyes narrowed, and she stopped talking to her husband. Heads turned all around the room. Curiosity was piqued, and I could see the gears turning in their heads. "What project?" my mother asked, her voice sounding a bit tight. I just gave her a mysterious smile and took a sip of my water. "Oh, you'll see soon enough. It's something Dad wanted me to handle when I was ready." The room felt suddenly cold. They knew I was up to something, but they couldn't figure out what. I could see them exchanging worried glances for the rest of the night. I had planted the seed of doubt, and now I just had to wait for it to grow. I was no longer the girl they could ignore. The following week, I arranged a private meeting with my mother. I didn't invite Ava. I sat her down in the living room and presented the lawyer's findings. I laid out the original deed and pointed to the clause my father had inserted. I explained that because I hadn't signed any consent forms, the transfer to Ava was legally invalid. I watched the color drain from her face. She picked up the paper, her hands shaking as she read the words over and over. The clause she had overlooked was now staring her in the face. She didn't see it coming at all. This must be a mistake," she stammered. I shook my head. "It's not a mistake, Mum. Dad knew what he was doing." Her face went from pale to a bright, angry red. She tried to say that the lawyer was wrong, but she couldn't look me in the eye. The power she thought she had was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. I told her that she had 48 hours to fix the paperwork on her own before I took the matter to court. She sat there in silence, the weight of her betrayal finally catching up to her. It was the first time I had ever seen her look truly small. Over the next 2 days, my mother tried every trick in the book. She used manipulation, guilt, and even tried to intimidate me. She called me in the middle of the night, crying about how I was tearing the family apart. She told me that Ava would be devastated and that it would be my fault if my sister's marriage failed because of the stress. I remained calm and unshaken through all of it. I had heard these kinds of speeches my whole life, but they didn't work anymore. The years of emotional abuse had forged my resolve into something hard and unbreakable. I told her that the only person tearing the family apart was the person who tried to steal from her own daughter. When guilt didn't work, she tried to offer me a small amount of money to walk away. I just laughed. It's not about the money, Mum. It's about the truth. She didn't understand that. To her, everything was a transaction. But to me, this was about justice. I stayed focused on the deadline. I didn't argue and I didn't scream. I just waited. I was the mountain, and her waves of guilt were just splashing against my base. When the 48 hours passed without her doing anything, I decided it was time for the final stage. I invited the whole family to a dinner at a local restaurant, under the guise of reconciliation. I told them I wanted to put everything behind us. They all showed up, looking relieved. Even Ava was there, wearing a new dress she probably bought with the money she thought she was saving on the house. As we sat through the first course, I began to reveal pieces of the truth slowly. I didn't drop the whole bomb at once. I started by talking about Dad and how much he loved the house. I saw the confused glances and heard the murmurs around the table. My mother looked terrified, her eyes darting around the room. She knew what was coming, but she couldn't stop it without admitting her guilt in front of everyone. I was calm, my voice steady and clear. I looked at each of them in turn, making sure they were paying attention. The atmosphere in the room shifted from celebratory to tense. I could feel the curiosity turning into a heavy, uncomfortable weight. The show was just beginning, and I had everyone's full attention. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out several copies of the legal document. I handed them out to my aunts, uncles, and cousins. I wanted everyone to see this, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. I pointed out the overlooked clause that protected my inheritance. I explained that the house was never legally Ava's. My mother froze in her chair, her face turning a ghastly shade of white. Ava started to stammer, her face turning red with embarrassment. The room went completely silent except for my calm voice explaining every detail. I showed them the emails where Ava had lied to Mum, and I showed them the original deed. I saw my aunt's eyes go wide as they read the proof of the betrayal. The family members who had once looked at me with pity were now looking at my mother and sister with disgust. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. The facts were doing all the talking for me. I laid it all out. The lies, the secret meetings, and the legal error that had ruined their plan. It was the most honest moment our family had ever experienced, and it was devastating. Ava, true to her nature, tried to argue. She stood up and started claiming entitlement, saying that she had done more for Mum over the years and that I didn't deserve anything. "I'm the one who stayed," she shouted, her voice echoing in the restaurant. I didn't flinch. I just countered her with proof. I pulled out my father's notes that showed I was the one who had actually helped pay for the renovations 5 years ago. I showed them that I had been contributing quietly while Ava was busy spending her own money on vacations. I didn't use insults or drama. I just used facts. Each time she tried to lie, I had a document that proved her wrong. The power dynamic flipped visibly right in front of everyone. People started whispering to each other, nodding as they looked at my evidence. Ava looked around the room and realized that no one was on her side anymore. Her shouting turned into a weak whimper. She sat down, looking defeated and small. My mother was still silent, staring at her lap like she wanted to disappear. The truth was a physical presence in the room, and it was crushing them both. But I wasn't finished. I decided to reveal the biggest secret of all. I looked at the whole group and told them about Dad's hidden trust fund. My mother's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. She had no idea I knew about it. "Dad knew you would do this, Mum," I said. "He set aside money just for me because he didn't trust you to be fair." The gasp that went around the table was audible. Now the story wasn't just about a house, it was about a lifetime of manipulation that my father had tried to prevent. My mother's face fell completely. She realized that her husband had seen her true character and had taken steps to protect me from her. It was the ultimate rejection. The rest of the family looked at her in a new light. They saw not just a grieving widow, but a woman who had tried to hide a daughter's future from her. The scandal was deep and messy, and it was all out in the open now. My mother looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. I stood there, feeling the power of the truth. I had taken back my life, and I had done it by exposing the shadows they lived in. My mother finally found her voice, but she didn't use it to apologize. Instead, she lashed out at me, calling me ungrateful and cruel for shaming her in public. She cried about how much she had sacrificed for me and how I was a snake in the grass. I responded calmly, looking her right in the eye. I don't need your gratitude, Mum. I need fairness. And since you wouldn't give it to me, I had to take it. The family watched, stunned by my composed strength. They had never seen me like this before. I wasn't the quiet, overlooked girl anymore. I was a woman who knew her worth. My mother's anger was like a fire that had run out of fuel. It sputtered and died as she realized that her words no longer had the power to hurt me. I told her that we would be handling the rest of this through our lawyers, and that I was done with the family drama. The room felt lighter for me, but heavy for them. I had said everything I needed to say. I didn't need her to understand, I just needed her to stop. The confrontation was over, and I was the one standing tall. In the days following the dinner, the fallout was massive. I started getting calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were questioning Mum's choices, while others were calling to apologize for ignoring me or believing the lies Ava had told. The tide was shifting throughout the whole family tree. My aunt called me crying, saying she was so sorry she didn't stand up for me at the first dinner. People who had once taken Ava's side were now distancing themselves from her. It was a strange feeling to be the one everyone wanted to talk to. I realized that by standing up for myself, I had given others the permission to see the truth too. My mother and Ava were suddenly very lonely. They tried to post things on social media about family loyalty, but no one liked their posts. The truth had traveled fast. I didn't feel happy about their misery, but I felt a deep sense of relief. The lies were gone. The fake smiles were over. I could finally breathe without feeling like I was being watched for mistakes. The family was different now, and for the first time, that was a good thing. With the help of Mr. Thorne, I filed an official legal challenge against the property transfer. We used the overlooked clause as our primary evidence. Ava and Mum tried to hire their own lawyer to fight back, but once their lawyer saw the original deed, he told them they didn't have a chance. The process was incredibly tense. There were many meetings in cold office rooms with a lot of legal papers. Ava would glare at me across the table, and Mum would just look out the window. But they couldn't deny the details. The clause was ironclad. My father had made sure of that. Every time they tried to find a loophole, Mr. Thorne would shut it down with a single sentence. I stayed focused on the goal. I didn't let their glares or their sighs get to me. I was following the law, and the law was on my side. It took several months of back and forth, but eventually, they realized that they were just wasting money they didn't have. They were forced to agree to a settlement that would return the property to its original status. The legal battle was coming to an end, and the victory was in sight. Finally, the big court day arrived. It was just a formal hearing to finalize the judge's decision, but the whole family was there. Everyone watched silently as the truth was laid bare one last time. The judge read the details of the trust, and the deed out loud for the record. My mother looked helpless in the front row, her shoulders slumped. Ava was visibly shocked when the judge scolded their previous lawyer for even attempting such a clear violation of the trust conditions. I remained calm, measured, and unshakable throughout the entire proceeding. I felt my father's presence in the room, almost like a warm breeze. When the judge finally banged the gavel and declared the transfer null and void, I didn't jump up and cheer. I just closed my eyes and took a deep breath. It was over. The house was mine, just as my father had intended. The hidden trust fund was officially made public, and the legal records now showed exactly what had happened. I walked out of the courtroom with Leah and Mr. Thorne, feeling like I was finally stepping into the sunlight after a very long time in the dark. The payoff was more than just the house. The judge ruled that I was the sole owner and that the hidden trust fund was to be released to me immediately. The inheritance was officially mine. Ava and Mum had no comeback left. They had spent so much on their own legal fees that they ended up with almost nothing. I stood on the sidewalk outside the courthouse, watching them walk away. I felt a quiet smile spread across my face. Victory tasted sweet, but it wasn't cruel. I didn't feel the need to rub it in their faces. I had won something much more important than a building. I had won my independence and my voice. I went back to the house that afternoon and walked through the garden. It was overgrown and messy, but it was mine. I started pulling weeds, feeling the dirt under my fingernails. It was the first time I felt truly at home in years. I realized that the house wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol of the fact that I couldn't be erased. I was going to fix it up, plant new flowers, and make it a place where truth was the most important rule. Weeks later, I decided to have one final conversation with my mother. I went to her apartment and sat across from her. She looked tired and defeated. "I didn't need your approval, Mum," I told her quietly. "I needed transparency. I needed you to treat me like a person who mattered." She nodded slowly, finally acknowledging the lesson she had learned the hard way. There were no more excuses, no more manipulation. She just sat there in the silence. I realized that our relationship would never be the same, and I was okay with that. I had found my own strength, and I didn't need her to validate it anymore. I told her I would be okay, and that I hoped she would find a way to be honest with herself. Then, I stood up and walked away. I walked out of her life and toward my own. I felt free from the past, stronger than I had ever been. I drove back to my house, my father's house, and looked at the garden I was going to rebuild. I was no longer the daughter who was overlooked. I was the woman who had fought for the truth and won. I was finally completely free.